This conference will now be recorded.
Sure is. Welcome to my favorite MPO meeting of the year because I can be home in 3 minutes. And welcome to the house that Scott and Troy built. We're still pretty proud of it. Let's open this North Front Range Transportation Air Quality Planning Council meeting. And if you would kindly join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, agenda item 1 is the acceptance of the meeting agenda. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda? Chair would entertain a motion to approve this.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem Hyde, second by Councilor Baszler to approve the agenda. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number 2 is approval of minutes. Hopefully, these are both the lead planning agency for air quality and the MPO minutes from July 6, 2023. Hopefully, you've had a chance to look those over. Are there any additions or corrections, please? If not, Chair would entertain a motion to approve this.
I'll make that motion. Second.
Thank you. Motion by Councilor Malo, second by Councilor Baszler to, are you a mayor pro tem? I want to make sure I address you correctly. I know you're a mayor because you're always late. You were on time.
See who I vote for, CDA.
Wait a minute, you're informed. Oh. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. This is the lead agency for air quality agenda. Under reports, number 3 is the Air Pollution Control Division report. That is a handout and written in your packets. Number 4 is the Regional Air Quality Council. That is a handout written in your packet. And finally, number 5 is the NFRMPO Air Quality Program. Written and in your packet as well. So let's move on to the Metropolitan Planning Organization agenda. Reports number 6, report of the chair. Welcome to Johnstown. That's my report. Number 7 is the executive director report. Please, Suzette.
Yeah, thank you. So I do have a few updates tonight. The first one is that I think some of you may have grabbed this flyer. VM Mobility has started their service up again in southwest portions of Weld County. So there are some here, and I'll just pass it this way, see if anybody wants to grab one of those. So the service, we had a pilot project going, and then that service stopped because we ran out of the funds on the pilot. And then from there, we've been working to get the pilot up and running again. So this started August 1st, and it's through our NMOF funds, both for North Front Range and Upper Front Range combined, that hold the service together. It serves residents that are age 60 and older or people with disabilities. It covers Alt, Fort Lupton, Gilchrist, Hudson, Johnstown, Kersey, Keensburg, Nunn, and Platteville, and other parts of unincorporated Weld County. So their operating hours are 8 to 4:30 Monday through Friday, and people can call in up to 7 days ahead to be able to make a reservation.
So they can call up and make an appointment or make a reservation. Is there a limit on where, I mean, not a limit as far as geographic, you show that here, but for example, can I call up a bus and get a ride to Bingo?
You need to sort what you can use it for? I don't think so. Is that true, Alex?
I don't believe that there's a limit.
Yes, I think part of it is saying that they want to make sure that people aren't socially isolated.
Okay.
So I don't think there is a limitation. So if you want to go to bingo, you're fine.
Cool.
As long as it's before,
As long as it's before 4:30.
Trust me, there are places that open at 11:30.
Fair enough.
Okay, so that's one of them, and Alex, do you have the, that's perfect. And then the other link up there, that would be great. So the other thing is just an update on House Bill 1101. We keep calling it the boundary discussion bill, but I refer to it as the representation bill. because we're really talking about representation on stack and on track, as much as we are talking about the boundaries. So there is a survey out right now. This week, CDOT staff is going through and having meetings at all of the CDOT regions. So Region 4 was Monday night, and I think Region 5 was ahead of us, but they're going through all the rest of them this week to get comments. So far, Region 4 has had the biggest turnout, so kudos to everybody that joined on that call and was part of that meeting. There is a survey out that if you're interested to fill that out, that you can go ahead and fill that survey out. And do you have that link up there?
I put it into the chat.
Oh, okay, the link's in the chat. Sorry, I'm not looking at the chat very well. So the link is in the chat so that you can go in and take that survey if you're interested, and it closes at the end of the month. So if you're interested in that, take the survey. I'd love to hear some comments from all of you. So the other thing, next thing on the list is that Link NoCo Phase 2. For all of you that were around for Link NoCo Phase 1, this is talking about premium transit connections within our region. They came out with 3 top corridors we were looking at. The number 1 corridor is looking at a transit connection between Greeley and Loveland on US 34. That's the number 1. And so the Link NoCo Phase 2 is digging in more detail onto that service on US 34. So we're hoping that we're also going to go after a grant as well as the funding we have, so that ultimately what we'd like to do is to be able to identify what the service looks like, help us identify where some of the stops could be, maybe even do some right-of-way reservations, things like that, if we're able to do that with some of the funding. So really starting to move that toward actually implementing service on the ground. So that RFP was released yesterday. It closes on the 15th of September. The other, 2 more things. The other thing is that we have I-25. Weld County is going to be the applicant for a mega grant on I-25 Segment 5. They're being the applicant because there are just some negotiations with CDOT. CDOT is providing all the data, all the things, so there's a heavy coordination with CDOT. They are asking for letters of support, and I did send an email out earlier this afternoon to everybody saying, if you are interested in providing a letter of support, I think that would be something that would be great and would go a long ways. There is a typo in that draft letter though, as Elizabeth has pointed out, that the overall total cost of the project is incorrect, so we'll get another email out. So for those of you that are interested in providing a letter, we'll get you the correct number on the overall project cost. But that is, we're going after $100 million, and Weld County is putting in $5 million into that project. And then the last thing I have is that there's an organization called the Intermountain West MPOs, and this organization started probably 20 years ago by MPOs in Colorado. It is now all the MPOs in Colorado, it's Arizona, it's Utah, it's Idaho, and occasionally we have somebody from California that jumps in. But what this group talks about is some of the issues that we have across the Intermountain West region that are pretty consistent for all of us. One of them that is looming for us right now is that we are an ozone non-attainment in our area. Every 5 years, EPA has a group of scientists that review that health standard. And right now we're at 70 parts per billion, and that we're in severe for non-attainment. We actually have 2 standards, but anyways, so what's happening is that they review the standard, what we're hearing is that they're likely to reduce that standard, which, I mean, you know, what doctor is gonna say, any part of bad things is gonna be good for you, right?
Which gas was that?
It's ozone, so
Ozone,
it's,
okay.
yeah, it's nitrogen oxide and volatile organic compounds.
Okay.
Those are the 2, so that make ozone in sunlight. So, but bottom line is on this, what we're concerned about is that as the standard gets lowered, the background ozone, background transport, especially in the Intermountain West, is very high for a lot of reasons. It's our climate, we're also sort of on that direct jet stream that comes across the Pacific Ocean and it deposits right across Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, and parts of Arizona. So the background ozone is pretty high in our region. So the technical people that have been on the calls and talking to us, they're saying that if it drops to 65 parts per billion, essentially most of the whole country is going to be in non-attainment. So not to say that we shouldn't be doing our share, we shouldn't be doing our thing, but how do you achieve a standard that you have no control over? I think so really what the letter is to ask EPA, help us figure this out, because we don't, this cliff is coming, if you're lowering the standard, we don't really know how to handle it. If everybody's in agreement that you're okay with asking for me to draft a letter to EPA to ask for, to outline what the issues are for us and to ask for their help in trying to figure this out, that I will probably get that out in probably the next month. You should probably see it next month. If that's something that the council would like to do.
Suzette asked that I be a part of this a couple of months ago. I've sat in on a couple of meetings now. I've invited Weld County's air quality experts, RAMPO, to be a part of this conversation. And it is really collaborative work that's happening from Boise on down to Arizona, to the Metroplex area in Phoenix, what is it, Maricopa County. And I'm excited about the conversations that they're having. But at this imminent EPA passage, see, and I read it was 55 parts per billion.
They're
Debating between 55 and 65. And when our transport background is what, Elizabeth, 40-ish, 42-ish in there somewhere, it's simply not attainable. And so I know Suzette would be appreciative, as would I, if this group would be in support of at least contacting the EPA and saying, hey, let's figure this out together. And we look at our math and we can look at yours. So I get kind of a general head nod. Mary, see yours going is, oh, sure, good to address it. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
And that's all I've got.
Okay. Questions for Suzette, please? Okay, number 8 is the TAC reports. That is written in your packet. Number 9, the mobility report is written in your packet. Boy, I don't like this. Number 10 is a community advisory committee. That is written and in your packet. Number 11, the quarter 2 2023 tip modifications is written and in your packet. And Rose Cunningham is written and in your packet. No, she's not. Agenda item 12 is the 2023 call for projects guidebook. And Rose, please.
Thank you. Last month, we brought the overall 2023 call for projects process and guidebook to the Planning Council. We've been talking about this for the last several months, and so this one, we are asking for approval of the 2023 call for projects guidebook, the process, and then it'll be the formal approval for the set aside as well. So just wanted to go quickly over just the outline of the call for projects and what has changed between last month and this month. So first, just an overview of some of the key dates. We are looking at having the call for projects open tomorrow and having final applications due on October 6th. We would then have the applicant presentations to Planning Council at the December meeting and final recommendation on the projects at the January Planning Council meeting. So one thing that I did want to point out is that this table has been updated with the most recent funding estimates. So this has been updated since what you saw last month. What has been updated is that rolled column. So that's anything that's prior to fiscal year 2026 that has not yet been allocated. And so you can see that under the Surface Transportation Block Grant and the Carbon Reduction Program, we had some funding that we are rolling into this call, so that's prior to 2026. It's about $1.6 million, bringing our total to $24 million. The $400,000 of the set aside is for the TMO incubator funds that we had discussed with Planning Council a few months ago. And so that is $100,000 per year starting in fiscal year 2024 to go to setting up TMOs within the North Front Range and funding towards that. So that's that $400,000 over the course of out to 2027. So just some of the highlights that have been changed from the previous calls for projects to this call is that TNO incubator set aside that I talked about. We also had discussed the eligible applicants, which is the North Front Range MPO member agencies, then partner agencies, so CDOT and the Regional Air Quality Council. Some of the requirements that we had updated for this call is aligning with the 2050 RTP goals, integrating the congestion management process with an SOB analysis for certain project types, and then also updated the equity and performance measure impacts. This is just an overview of the requirements for all projects, so I'll just highlight a few of them. The first is that for all 4 of these federal funding programs, there is a 17.21% match requirement. There are certain projects that have exceptions for that, but generally it is that 17.21%. All of the projects must be within the NFRMPO planning area and must be on one of our regional corridors and consistent with the corridor visions in the 2050 RTP. Then last thing that I'll hit on is that if a project impacts a state facility or is an ITS project, project sponsors must receive CDOT concurrence for their project. So the big thing that has changed from last month to this month is the SCBG request limits. So last month there was some discussion about the formula that we had been using for the last several years for the SCBG program. It was a population-based formula that used a small community set aside. That what ended up happening and what was questioned is that some of the large communities had a lower request limit than some of the small communities. And so we discussed this at the TAC meeting last month as well. And during that meeting came up with a different option that was agreed on by the TAC for how we can do the request limits instead. And so we base this still on population. So as you can see, 34% of the population within the NFRMPO is a small community and 66% is a large community. So using that percentage split for the proportion of funding going towards small and large communities. So within approximately $9 million that we have available within the SCBG program, we said that 34% of that, our target would be to go to small communities and having that request limit for small communities to be $1.6 million. And then 66% going towards the large communities, so the request limit for large communities is about $3.2 million. So I wanted to pause to see if there was any questions about how we came to that conclusion or any concerns about that.
Questions?
All right. So just quickly, the request limits for the other funding programs. For the CMAQ program, it is 50% of the available funding, and then the TA and carbon reduction programs is 100% of the available funding, and that's listed in that maximum request line at the end there. Just a reminder, the goals that we had adopted for the 2050 RTP are what we use to create the scoring criteria. We talked about this the last few months, but if there are any further questions about scoring criteria, I'm happy to bring up the guidebook to talk about that in more details. If not, that is all I had to discuss tonight. And so we are asking for action on this. And like I said, this is approving the guidebook, the process, and then a final approval of that $100,000 per year TMO incubator set aside.
Questions for Anna Rose, please? Thank you, Anna Rose and staff, for your job well done, your hard work on this. If there are no questions, on page 27 of your packet is resolution number 2023-13 of the North Front Range Transportation and Air Quality Planning Council adopting the 2023 Call for Projects Process and Guidebook. And if there are no questions, Chair would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mayor Rittenmeyer, second by Councilor Baszler to approve resolution 2023-13. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay. 2. Here. Number 13 is the FY 2022-2023 UPWP FY 2023 Task Amendment number 2. Becky, please.
Thank you. Good evening. So this is a task amendment only request that came from the city of Fort Collins for transport. And what this is requesting is 2 additional funds, 2 additional tasks be added that are funded with FTA funds. So there is no change to the MPO's budget. And so this is budget neutral for the MPO, but adding additional tasks in Appendix B. So the first task is for the Transport Onboard Ridership Survey, which is $43,130 of FTA 5307 funds. And the other one is Transport Onboard Passenger Surveys, which is $64,030, a combination of 5307 and 5310 funds. And so we have been asked by Transport via FTA to add these in. These have already been funded. One has already been completed, the other one is about to be completed. And so they're just requesting that we put this into the UPWP so that they can move forward with that. So TAC recommended Planning Council approve this at their meeting last month, and that would be through Resolution 2023-14. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions for Becky, please? Boy, I like this meeting. Page 33.
It's because Johnny's not here.
That's true.
Here comes another mayor.
Yeah, see? That was a good joke. Mayor's late, mayor's late. It's true. I was there myself. All right, page 33, your packet, resolution number 2023-14 of the North Front Range Transportation and Air Quality Planning Council approving the second amendment to the FY 2023 tasks of the FY 2022-2023 Unified Planning Work Program, UPWP. I read, I'm a professional. If there are no questions, Chair would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mayor Rennemeyer, second by, he's Mayor, he was late, Mayor Pro Tem Hyde to approve
You should have been sitting.
I guess.
Resolution
I've learned my
2023.
lesson. I'll never sit on this side again.
Further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Becky. Okay. Moving right along to discussion items. Number 14 is the FY 2024 through 2027 Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP, which is on page 34 of your packet. Anna Rose, please.
Thank you. All right, tonight we are discussing the fiscal years 2024 to 2027 Transportation Improvement Program. We adopt a new TIP on an annual basis. Most of the time we adopt it in the same time frame as CDOT adopts their STIP, but this time we are doing it in alignment with the 2050 RTP and the conformity determination that goes along with that. So the 2024 to 2027 TIP includes all federally funded and or regionally significant projects. This includes projects that were awarded funding from the 2021 call for projects for fiscal years 2024 and 2025. Any projects with prior fiscal year funding, which has been rolled into fiscal year 2024, and then also locally funded projects, which meet the definition of air quality significant. So the narrative for the 24 to 27 TIP carries forward all of the policies and procedures from the 2023 to 2026 or the current TIP with a few updates that have been included. So the first is clarification on our additional allocation process. That's if additional federal funding comes into the pools of funding controlled by the NFRMPO and how that process works out. So we just added some additional information about what that process looks like. And then also clarification that project overages are not eligible under the additional allocation process. With this TIP, this is the first one that we are adopting under the greenhouse gas planning standard. So we have added the requirements from the greenhouse gas transportation report into it. And we have also updated the air quality conformity determination as part of this TIP as well. Similar to the call for projects, we updated the equity and performance measure analysis. So one of the other things that we have updated is just a clarification to the air quality significant definition. So there's several things that I have listed on here, but one of the first the first bullet point is what we have updated. It previously just said adding at least 2 lane miles, but we have clarified that to adding at least 2 through lane miles. So just making it a little bit more clear on what qualifies under that air quality significant definition. And so the public comment period for the TIP and the conformity determination will open tomorrow, and they will close on September 3rd. And the public comment period for the greenhouse gas transportation report ends on August 6th. We will have the public hearing for the conformity determination at the Planning Council meeting on September 7th, and then we are looking for council action on the TIP and the RTP at that same meeting on September 7th. So I'd like to open it up for any questions.
Questions or for Anna Rose or discussion, please? Like to say, we're not Johnny, but I say it looks good. Thank you. Thank you. So if there are no questions, we just need a general head nod for you to proceed. I'm assuming that we will take action on this September?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Anna Rose. Okay, number 15, excuse me, for the under discussion items. The 2050 Regional Transportation Plan. Alex, please.
Can only hope to keep it as quickly as Becky and Anna Rose just did their items, but we will see. Big thank you to the MPO staff and to Planning Council and TAC members for helping lead us through the RTP process. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, which is super exciting. We are coming into this final portion of it. And so we want to give an overview of the RTP, go a little bit more in depth than we have, and also tie the thread between the disparate pieces that MPO staff has come and talked to the council about over the last 1.5 2 years or so. And so just to start this off, just the context of the RTP, it focuses on the entire multimodal transportation system, minus airports, but focusing within the economic, transportation, development, and sustainability goals. We look at least a 20-year planning horizon, as Anna Rose just mentioned with the TIP, and then with the discussions about the fiscally constrained planning portion. All of the projects that are included in the RTP must have a reasonably anticipated funding source, and so we've worked with the local communities and with CDOT to identify those projects as well as the potential funding sources. And then, because we are a part of the non-attainment area, we do update this every 4 years. And then on the right, I just like showing this map because this is comparing the 2010 urban areas to the 2020 urban areas. And so the 2010 is the shaded areas, and then the solid lines are the 2020 census areas. And you can see the urbanizing area, so that the colored lines, really the most expanded area is in the central part of our region in the Windsor area. And so that means our region is growing together more than it's growing out. And so I think that's just really good context for how we think about our transportation system and the projects that have risen to the top. And so this cabal of numbers is comparing the 2019 population to the 2050 population. And so just a quick explainer on how we got these numbers. We work with the Department of Local Affairs and State Demographer's Office. They give us county-wide control totals, what they believe the counties will have. And then we use the Urban Sim land use allocation model, which then figures out based on current trends, current population, expected developments, where will new jobs and population households be placed throughout the region. And so these areas are based on the growth management areas, just so that way we are comparing a consistent geographic area. Obviously there'll be annexation and boundary changes between now and 2050. And so you can see just the absolute number as well as the percent change. Places like Johnstown are expecting a 272% growth in population.
Stop it.
That Buc-ee's, they're coming for you.
Like a 440% growth in jobs and severance. And then also just absolute number of Greeley adding 70,000 people, Fort Collins adding about 70,000 people. So unsurprisingly, we are definitely expecting a lot of growth, both population-wise and job-wise in our region. Over the last year or so, we have discussed the goals and objectives with the Planning Council. A few months ago, we added the safety measure, the safety goal based on council feedback, but this also lines up with the call for projects that was just approved. And so this is how we organize what the MPO does to make sure that we are working towards achieving these goals and objectives. And then this is how we organized the plan. Before we started this plan, one of the big things that MPO staff did was try to figure out what do we want to do differently with this plan, and two things rose to the top. The first was getting better at answering the question, so what? Why are we including this data? What story are we trying to tell? And then the other one is, connecting the threads between, ironically, connecting the threads between the different parts of the plan, so that way it's not just, here's a piece of information, and then a chapter later, here's another piece of information, a little bit more added. And, okay. So yeah, tying the thread between, and so our planning context is just what does the region look like today? The trends is looking at what does the region look like today in terms of population, jobs, the transportation system, what emerging trends, and then what do we expect the most likely scenario is in the future? And that was identified through the visioning and scenario planning section, and then the funding and financing to figure out what projects should be prioritized, how are they funded, and then what is the gap between those two things. Again, as the MPO, we can't focus on every single corridor that's in the region. So we have these regionally significant corridors, which includes the interstate highways, US highways, state highways, and then major roadways that connect to activity centers. So examples of activity centers are CSU, UNC, the Centera shopping area, the downtown areas, the airports, etc. And so the colors just denote whether these are going north, south, or east, west. And then there's not really a priority besides the first 10 or 12 or so, which are the interstate US and state highways. Similarly, we also have our regional transit corridors. And so these are broken up into local priorities like extending the MAX corridors in Fort Collins or premium transit along the US 34 business, which is really on the go. We have expansion of existing service like Flex, Scooter Express, Mustang. We have the Farming's passenger rail. We included both corridors because there's no official decision on which corridor yet. And then we also have the premium transit, the Lincoln-Oco corridor. So the US 34, the Great Western, and Loveland to Windsor. And then we also have the regional active transportation corridors. These were developed as part of the 2013 regional bike plan. And the gradual change has been that filling out what has been built. Super exciting that the Kruger Trail should open within the next year or so, and then the Great Western Trail between Eaton and Windsor should be completed later this summer. So we are making a lot of progress on these regional trails, and it's super exciting to see that what once was lines on a map is now being built out, and you can see the progress that's being made. So based on those corridors and the funding availability and the projects that were submitted by our local communities, these are the identified planned projects. And so the important ones to look at are the ones that are highlighted in yellow. Those are the fiscally constrained projects. And then, so these are mainly capacity projects, but these also include interchanges. So we have the merge, so US 34 at 47th Avenue and 35th Avenue? Okay, and then the mobility hub that's located between that, and then we also have the Wealth County Road 38 interchange on the I-25. So Anna Rose spends a lot of time over the last few months talking with council about the funding estimates. So we just took this slide to show the dedicated funding to roadways, intersection improvements, bike and ped, and transit. And then the flexible is basically everything else that it doesn't necessarily have as dedicated of a purpose. And that's where the majority of funding is within a region. So in total, we expect there to be about $13.3 million available over the next 27 years for transportation projects in the region. One of the other things we did as part of the RTP was to look at scenarios. And so the 3 scenarios that we looked at, we compared them to the baseline, which is just the fiscally constrained plan. And so what projects could be funded. We also looked at unconstrained, so all projects that were submitted, what does that look like? We also looked at no build, so if we just get the same transportation system with what's being constructed right now. And we also looked at a high density fiscally constrained project or scenario to see if more people live in the urban core of the region, how does that impact the transportation system and how does that change things? And so I believe that these are from the unconstrained project scenario. And so this is if every project was funded. You can see on the left is level of service, a lot still issues along I-25, and then a lot of the corridors that connect into I-25. But you see on the right in the travel time index, there's not nearly as much as there is in the no build or in the constraints section. So there's a lot more detail and expansion on this in the actual plan, but this is some of the ways that we tested how what we received and the logic of how our investments are helping us achieve our goals and performance measures. The other things that we've developed are corridor visions. So these are looking at the plan projects that were submitted by the communities. This is looking at the different plans that have been developed locally, regionally, and statewide. This is looking at what we heard from the public as part of our mapping exercise that we did over at the beginning of this year. So we have these for 30 regionally significant corridors, the 16 regional transit corridors, and the 12 regional active transportation corridors. We've gone back and edited this layout a little bit, but you can also see, based on the land use model outputs, within a half mile, the population growth between 2019 and 2050, and then in this case BMT, but we also have vehicle revenue miles for transit. And then there's a general contextual map on the side to show the corridor within the region. And then the 2 things that tie all of this together, and I think, yeah, this is my last slide. We've prepared the greenhouse gas transportation report as required by the CDOT planning standard. And so that looks at the NPO specific area that goes through the Transportation Commission and the Air Pollution Control Division. And that says that the region needs to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by a certain amount compared to a baseline plan. And that baseline plan was the 2045 RTP. So we reran the 2045 RTP through the new model to get updated numbers there, and then compared that with additional strategies. One of the things that we did was use funding from the Transportation Commission to improve our model. So some of those things are still in the works to finalize, but that helped a lot with understanding induced demand, understanding the bike level of stress, TDM. And we also were able to purchase better data, so location-based service data for jobs. And the 4 strategy areas for GHG reduction are the same as what we had in our plan last year. So that's looking at building out the regional active transportation corridors, as well as expanding bike connections within the communities, improving operations through adaptive traffic signals, investing in transit, and then investing in transportation plan management. And it's been super exciting that we can point to specific things that Planning Council has put funding toward in all of these to show that we are actually working toward achieving this GHG transportation report. The other thing that we will go through is conformity, and that is done on behalf of the entire northern sub-area, which is the NFRMPO area, and then all of Will County and portions of Larimer County. And that goes through EPA and the Federal Highway Administration. And that's making sure that we are reducing ozone precursors and remain below our motor vehicle emissions budgets. And so we will be going to the Transportation Commission in 2 weeks at their August meeting for the GHG transportation report. And then council will be approving the conformity report at your September meeting, and then we'll submit that for by the deadline of October. So we do have this RTP. The plan was released for public comment in July. It will be open through August 9th. We have received public comment. A lot of it saying that the plan is actually too car centric. So we are going through and adding in the multimodal investments that we've heard from communities into those vision plans to show that the big projects are what's modeled, and those are capacity projects, but that doesn't mean that there aren't sidewalks, transit investments, bike and ped investments. And then we also received some feedback from City of Greeley staff, so we'll be going back and making sure that the final plan that's approved by council has that public comment integrated into it. So I think that's the relatively high level overview of the last few years of work. Pretty happy. We got the plan down to, I think, about 280 pages, which is super exciting. I think it was over 300 and something pages last time. So we're here to save the planet with less paper.
What are you gonna do with yourself now, Alex?
We're working on it.
I was gonna say take a nap.
2050. Yeah, updated. That's Herculean work and well done, Alex. Any questions or comments, please?
Yeah, and again, great work. And I appreciate you sharing one of my questions was, what are you hearing from the public? Because you've been doing a good job getting the word out and so it's helpful to hear that. Were any of the comments you're getting from the public around safety and the issues with the increase in fatal crashes?
One of the comments that we received from the city of Greeley was about the safety target. And so we've gone back and talked about what the NPO can do in terms of the federal safety performance measure is already set, but that doesn't mean that the NPO can't set its own regional target that does have more of an aspirational target. So I wouldn't say that we've gotten anything about safety in the plan from the public, but we have from our communities talking about what the city really is doing with some of their grants and internal engineering work.
Okay, because I guess that would be something I would hope we would be hearing from people. I mean, I listened into staff this morning with TC, we were hearing all of the data from our region, from our state, and they're heartbreaking. I mean, 2 people a day are dying in Colorado on our roads. That's a terrible statistic. And so I would hope that whether we're hearing it, I guess, from the public or not, it's good to know that it's coming from the communities as well. My other questions, you mentioned on the slide about the money that there's 13.3 available. What's the overall need, like when you looked at the unconstrained? Like how far apart?
That was a great question. I did not take that slide.
Off the top of my head, I don't remember the exact dollar amount, but we did have some of the RSC capacity projects and the non-RSC capacity projects were what were considered fiscally unconstrained within the plan. But under the rest of the investments, we didn't have an unmet need identified. So I think it was, I can't say the number off the top of my head, but that is identified within chapter 4, what that unmet need was.
Yeah, as long as it's in there, again, because we look at these in terms of what are we trying to work toward, and if we're trying to work toward more funding for transportation, then how much more money would we need to do the things that got cut from the list?
And we do have, in chapter 4, there is a section of all of those unconstrained projects. So we have the unconstrained plan, which lists those RSC projects at least. And so, that is able to show still like the importance and the commitment to those projects if additional funding becomes available outside of what we had already considered fiscally constrained.
Okay, I just have one more. So your slide with all of the population and job growth was amazing. And especially, we had the presentation from the state demographer recently and looking at this. So I guess where my brain went was looking at these numbers and then looking at the map on the prior slide about how are the communities growing. I guess what I'm curious is, with all of that growth in jobs and population, where are the trips going to and from? So it's not just the numbers are getting bigger, but where are the travel sheds changing or projected to change over time? There's more jobs going in one part of the Front Range and more housing in another.
Right.
Which would seem like it would then inform the corridor planning that you're prioritizing. So I guess I was just trying to figure out, how do you map that growth in terms of projected?
So that is
Travel.
one thing, that's going to be a two-part answer. One, so our land use allocation model outputs become an input into the travel demand model. And so that is something that is considered in the travel demand model. And for the years that we have to do conformity, we have the specific outputs from the land use model. And so that's one of the things that changes is based on the traffic analysis zone, where that population is and what that growth is, and basically how attractive that is to people.
Right.
That is something that's considered in that four-step modeling process. The second thing I would add to that is, I think about a week or two ago, we were working this out, a meeting between the land use model consultant and the travel demand model consultant, so that we can get better, the models can talk to each other better, so that we can do more of the scenario and kind of the testing of the different, if there's more growth that happens here, what does that look like? And that was one of the things that, as a way to address the induced demand question from the Transportation Commission, that's one of the ways that they wanted to do that, is figuring out how do we get the two models to talk to each other better. So it is something that's considered, and we would like to make it better. I guess it's kind of
Thank you. Yeah, I do think
approach.
yeah, it would be helpful, and it sounds like you're working on penetrate of the public. And then for the public to be able to see that.
Right.
So that they're not surprised that in 10 years from now, the increase in trips going, whether it's 34 or.
Right. It's not just 10% increase across the whole region.
Right, people they're gonna know that, yes, we know that's coming. Okay. And then I guess I was surprised on the 66% increase in VMT. How do we have a 66% increase in VMT and hit our emission reduction targets? Or maybe I was reading it wrong, but it looked, 67% increase in VMT on your table.
Yeah, so I will say that one of the things that's considered in the moves output for the greenhouse gas is a lot of the miles in the future are expected through electric vehicles. And so even though there's an increase in VMT, that doesn't necessarily mean an increase in emissions. And then that VMT would also include the bus miles and the transit miles, so it's not just personal vehicles. So the region is still expecting an increase in VMT, but we are expecting that GHG to go down based on speed improvements and investments in other transportation.
With an increase in population, Alex, do you get additional GHG allotments, so to speak? You get, I guess my curiosity is 329.6% increase in population, 66.9% increase in vehicle miles traveled. To me, that's circulating. And the fact that,
Yeah, but it's not one for one, right?
yeah, it's not, exactly.
Right.
Your population's gonna increase by 329, wouldn't you be just a rough math by
So
a
that'd be something
redneck
to,
disc jockey? but-
yeah, that's a good point. So how do you highlight that so that it's clear?
But remember, this is just a corridor. He's just using an example. That's not the whole region.
Oh, yeah, sorry, this is just a half mile.
That's just, I.
Well, I was trying to be positive for a minute there, for crying out loud.
Holy crap, okay, so what's the, maybe I don't want to know what the whole number is.
But that is something that's in our GHG report, and I believe VMT is elsewhere in the plan to show kind of the relationship between.
Okay.
So I did have so population is going up. I see the graph is turning all to F. Basically transport's going to garbage, because we don't have enough money to widen or do anything to keep this one. Is there anything, to basically have park and rides to transport people to the major areas? Because most of us are still living in single-family homes. I don't think there's a lot, I guess I've seen some apartment clusters going up recently, but by and large, the vast majority of people live in single family, and is there a way to gather them and then bus them, so to speak?
I will say that the Greeley on the local plan, the Fort Collins Transportation Master Plan, consider things like mobility hubs, so that there are these little places around the region where you can either park and ride or be able to go from transit to micro transit or to a scooter. So there are local plans. So the RTP does consider things like that, but outside of the major the mobility hubs like the one for Merge in the city of Greeley, it's not really something that we, but I do think that.
So you're not considering basically parking lots to gather people? Okay.
Additional questions for Alex, please? Thank you, sir. Thank you for your hard work.
I'll say it.
Okay, let's move on to agenda item 16, which is presentations. The Front Range Passenger Rail District. Mayor Karsbeck, I understand you wanted to introduce this conversation.
Well, thanks to Andy and David for being on the phone here. It's discussed at our last NPO meeting. I felt we had some concerns, or at least I did on the board. Johnny did as well. Johnny can't make it tonight. That just by bringing them in for a presentation. I will say since then, kind of one of our questions or confusion was when are we going to have the actual discussion of the alignment? And it was brought up at our meeting last Friday that discussion will be coming up in our planning committee meeting, which Johnny and I are both on, for a vote, like a recommendation that will go to the general board of directors. So that was kind of a major, I think, concern from myself and in the group here. Other than that, it's, I think our concerns of trying to, Andy I think already knows this, but being half of a lot of Weld County, being on this, what's the benefit? What can we see out of this, as well as from what we learned in our last meeting too, partnering with the governor's office, potentially trying to push this through in 2024. So we have them here tonight, and I think they'll both be giving a presentation, and that's all I have. But thank you for being here.
Andy, you starting?
I would love to start. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Recognize Mayor Karsbeck. Thank you for being a board member for the district and being there tonight. I'm joined by David Singer here tonight, who is the lead for the CDOT management, project management for our service development plan, which, as you know, is kind of that business plan for the district that we need to share with the feds. I'm going to go through this first part of the presentation fairly quickly because some of you have seen this before, but of course I just want to leave enough time for question and answers and a dialogue with you all afterwards. So with that said, go ahead, next slide. You all have been talking about this since you met, and it's no new information to you, but I-25 congestion, safety, and reliability is a major issue, as well as everything that you were just talking about with greenhouse gas emissions, a major policy conversation that's going on, disconnected communities, having conversations with the goal of this passenger rail, connecting those communities and studying how we're able to do that, compounded by the population gain that you all were just discussing as well. A lot more people are going to come here. Our current transportation system is not adequate enough, and we do need to have more options. Next slide, please. So, you know, passenger rail is a new intercity trail service. The initial service is what we're focusing on. There are some opportunities for future expansion, of course, and we're hopeful for that. But the initial service is the study area for the service development plan is Pueblo through Denver. Our district stretches from border to border, but our initial studying for that initial service goes from Pueblo through Denver, north to Fort Collins. Long-term vision, as I mentioned, connecting communities from Wyoming down the Front Range to New Mexico using existing tracks shared with the freight rails for those purposes listed there, minimizing costs and accelerating that service start date. Next slide, please. I'm going to turn this over to David here, and he'll take a few slides.
Thank you, Andy. And thanks to the MPO for having us tonight. Everyone can hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So I wanted to at least differentiate. Not all passenger rail is created equal. For me in the Denver area, I think about fast tracks, and that's really a commuter rail system which moves within a single metro area. And the characteristics are different, the fleet is different, the types of trips are different. A commuter rail system will stop and start every couple of miles. They don't really, because they're stopping and starting, they don't get high speeds, and it really just covers a smaller geographic area. What this study is focusing on is intercity rail, and it's moving from market to market. And so there's spacing in between those stops, big dots on the map. And because of that, it could reach high speeds and maintain them. So you're covering a lot more ground in a higher area. For purposes of funding, FTA covers commuter rail and FRA covers intercity. So we've got different oversight, different funding streams, different guidance and stakeholder coordination. So it was helpful for me to kind of level set these two as we move forward into the study. Next slide. Andy touched upon the needs, and I think it's worth mentioning the types of trips are broad and far-reaching. Where it could be commuters, it could be students, people with disabilities, it could be a recreational trip, it could be a special event for a game or a state fair, and tourists. We don't want to limit the amounts of trips. We've seen on the coasts or across the world that train is a vital choice for travelers. Next slide. Now, many of us have seen or been a part of this conversation for passenger rail. It's gone on for generations. It's something that the Front Range in Colorado has sought after and studied several times. Each of them have been visionary and broad, whether it's looking down the median of I-25 or Hyperloop or Super Slab. Many of us have seen these long-term visionary ideas, and each of them have come with a very large price tag, with an end in mind and something north of $10 billion. And so it was very hard to take that first step to implement many of those visions. At the same time, in southern Colorado, the Southwest Chief, which is a passenger rail line, came under attack, and a group came together, formed a coalition and then a commission, and was very effective to get federal dollars to modernize and preserve that corridor. So the Southwest Chief, back in 2017, expanded their vision to expand to the north, to the Front Range as well. And they undertook an alternatives analysis. And they also had an ambitious vision for 24 trains a day, but they did something different in saying, we've talked with FRA and Amtrak and BNSF and the Union Pacific, and they've said that a successful system across the country walks before it can run. And so they recommended, what, as Andy said, focusing on taking that first step. How do we interoperate with existing freight on the corridor and save that capital investment, lower the entry point? It was that definition and that scope which led to the 2020 FRA grant, which I'll talk about in a minute, but I also want to talk about, or hand it off back to Andy to talk about the most recent milestone here is the creation of the district itself. Next slide.
So as you all know, right, Front Range Passenger Rail District was created by the legislature in 21. It became a new local government on July 1st of 2022. So we just had our 1-year-old birthday. Probably should have organized a much better birthday party than we didn't have. But in any case, it's a new local government. We're an independent district created by the legislature in order to finance, design, construct, and operate a passenger rail service along the front rail. As you know, there needs to be a ballot measure to approve any ongoing funding, stable funding for this district. I see that as a key milestone, if not the key milestone for the district moving forward. Without a stable funding stream, whatever form that takes, it's going to be really difficult to get this off the ground. However, one of the keys that will help in organizing this and getting this off the ground and administratively ready is working with the local communities to develop those station improvement districts, as well as the stations, as well as working with you all along through the service development plan and with the planning process. Next slide, please. My board of directors is broad and diverse. We have the bulk of them coming from the local governments and the regional council of governments and the COGs and the NPOs along the Front Range that are within the district. There are also 6 government appointees, CDOT is on there, and then the non-voting members you can see that are on there as well. And it's really important to have them on the board as they hear the conversations going on. You all know as well as I do the importance of working with the railroads and Amtrak and RTD throughout this whole conversation. It can't just be done in a silo, especially now, building off of the work that David just spoke to in that prior slide. So next slide, please. I'm sure as local leaders and decision makers, you often hear this phrase, right? We got a once in a lifetime opportunity for you here. With the rail funding that we do have, though, it truly is a very fascinating time to undertake a new passenger rail corridor adventure along the Front Range. As David mentioned, the foundation of all of the years of planning and advocacy that the groups have done to this point, with the district being established. As mentioned, the governor is in strong support. And the new programs and funding available through the bipartisan infrastructure law, the IIJA, is also extremely important. And I'll jump into that here in the next couple of slides as well. Next slide. So one of the things before I hand it back over to David to talk about the service development plan is this corridor identification development program, which is a key new funding stream from the Federal Rail Administration for new passenger rail corridors to be developed around the United States. So it's the first step is to apply to be part of the CIDP, and as you can see, the district applied for this in March of 23. We expect to hear whether we were accepted or not in the fall, probably in the next month or two, probably closer to September. And when we are accepted, and we expect to be accepted into the program, that comes with around $500,000 of funding that will help us on administration and planning. On the left there, you can see this opens up a lot of opportunities for the state to leverage some funding that has been identified at the state level. There's a 90-10 federal match on this. So whatever we come up with, the federal government, the FRA, is able to match 90% of it. So it's very exciting, and there's also no ceiling. We don't expect to get, a $100 million grant out of this, but we do expect to see some really good planning dollars that can help us get through NEPA and really get us into that capital construction phase of the corridor, and help us negotiate with the railroads and develop all of those administrative needs that we need to in order to run a railroad. Next slide, please. David, please take it away.
Yeah. So the term of art that FRA uses is a service development plan. It's really corridor planning for railroads, and similar to what we've seen on our PEL programs. But FRA's role this time around is really key. It gives it consistency and integrity in the corridor planning process. It allows us to follow industry standards and, as Andy said, remain eligible for federal funds. So they're always providing oversight and guidance on how this plan is unraveling. So it's a 2-year program. It's a 2-year plan. We're midway through. Andy talked about the termini of getting from Pueblo to Fort Collins, and really it's that first step. So I'll show you a slide that, at the end with the kind of individual elements and schedule, but at a high level, it's looking to define what type of service is the Front Range looking to provide. Who are our customers? How many trips is this going to be? Is it 3? Is it 6? Is it 12? Are they nighttime trips or weekend trips or daytime trips? We're trying to define the characteristics of the trips. And then from there, what infrastructure is needed to provide those necessary trips? Is it extra train tracks, sidings? Is it bridges, or tunnels, or platforms? We begin to understand the capital needs to provide this service. And from there, once we know the operational and feasibility, it's performing cost estimates, understanding the financing and funding mechanisms to look at the cost benefit analysis for each of these services.
If you would kindly pause for just a second, the executive director has a question, please.
Yeah, thank you. David, I'm hearing you about the station location and coming up with how it would operate and all the options, but have you determined that we are staying on the alignment that has been identified in the legislation? So is the alignment staying on for us in this region on the Burlington Northern line, or is that still up for debate?
Give me 2 slides and I can come back and answer your question if that's okay.
Sure.
I've got a slide on route identification. So the next slide, I want to talk about how we make decisions, and FRA has talked about criteria for a successful corridor. Andy mentioned this competitive process for them to provide oversight and guidance. These are the criteria that they've asked would-be candidates. And to the extent that we can show that we're thinking about or measuring these things, makes us more attractive. So, as part of our application and as part of our service development plan, we're going to be looking at the performance, the ridership, the cost, how much non-federal funding can come, whether an operator such as Amtrak supports a specific corridor. We'll look to prior recommendations, prior planning recommendations, either at the local or regional level or at the state level, or legislative intent as well. We're focusing on the customer, whether it's a historically or low income or minority population, seeing whether it's competitive and changes of behavior. How does it connect with existing and planning transit? And is it taking people, we talked about origins and destinations earlier, is it taking people where they want to go? And the benefits are holistic. It may be a financial benefit, but it's also an environmental and economic. We're looking at regional equity benefits and the ability to connect to the national network. So these are kind of our performance measures, and all the elements of the service development plan will be run through these filters because you can already imagine the types of trade-offs that this study will have to reconcile. The next slide, I knew that the route question's been on the forefront of the North Front Range's mind, and so I wanted to at least unpack it for you. Our definition of our scope is looking at existing freight corridors. And so these 3 lines you see here are the existing freight corridors in the north segment of the study. To the south, there's just one. And so that decision is easy. We have, the goal of this study is not, Andy talked about the long-term version of a system that spans throughout the Front Range. The goal of this system is to pick one. And I think we're trying not to repeat past mistakes of identifying trains for everywhere and not leaving us with a place to start. FRA said start with one corridor, and the legislature said that as well. So these are the I would say differentiators that help document the rationale on the analysis. You see here that look to plans that have occurred at the state and regional level, the past plan by the Rail Commission. We look to the condition of the freight operators and the willingness of the freight operators. Union Pacific is that blue line. The teal line is operated by the Burlington Northern. That's the Front Range sub, as you mentioned. The district has yet to select an operator, but we do know Amtrak has laid out its national vision, and that's something that's worth considering. So these are the type of things that we've laid out. Not only the host railroads' willingness, but the state of the condition of each of those corridors as well.
So David, hey, I have another question. This is Suzette again. So the legislation has laid out that the preferred alignment is along the Burlington Northern, or this sort of light green line that we're seeing on our map. And yet you're analyzing these other options. Do you think the legislature is open to those other options? And do you think that would be, and I guess I don't know if I'm asking you or Andy, if that is something that you think that they would be open to making that change, or do you think they're fairly set on the alignment that they've had in the legislation?
I haven't heard anything from, I think, from a planning and project management perspective, I want to be able to document the analysis, because whatever that recommendation is from this report and the recommendation that FRA makes will be looked back to throughout the remainder of this study. And I think the timelines that we've taught about are years into the future. So having worked on long corridors in the past, we want to document critical milestones. So I'm not really directly answering the questions on what the political desires are, but I think from a empirical data, I want to be able to document how each of these perform.
And Suzanne, let me just add on to what David was saying. I think, I will be the first one to say I can't guess what the motivations of the legislators are, even though I've tried for many years. I still can't do it. However, what David said, I think, is where we are right now, is we are building the case for the best alternative that we can make for a starter service that minimizes as much cost to the taxpayers, maximizes the opportunities to leverage those funding and opportunities on existing rail. We are looking at the light green one and the pink one. The blue one, I'll be honest with you, does not really connect as many of those major markets that I think the FRA is looking for. And we are also looking, we do have that legislative intent for that Northwest corridor, which could be built into both the light green and, I don't want to call it pink, we'll call it what, fuchsia, the fuchsia line. So,
Pink is fine.
all right, pink line. So I think, that's where we are right now, but we're trying to get the data that builds the case so that we can all come back to you and your constituents and make the case. And people may not agree with what it is that we're looking at, but at least they'll know that we've done our homework, and they'll know why we chose what we chose.
Can I ask a question while we're on our analysis? David, is there any thought about, so we'll use Loveland for, I forgot the term, but the smaller track that connects, like a short haul, kind of like Great Western, so from Loveland to Johnstown, there's a smaller track that, like a, I don't know the word for it. In Disney, you call it a lateral, but.
A spur?
I'm talking about? A spur, yeah. Is there any talk about that? So going off the NSF, using Great Western, that potentially, or, going to Windsor or Johnstown, potentially Greeley that way?
Mayor, it's a good question, and I think we've heard lots of types of scenarios where there is that type of artery or appendage, using the backbone metaphor, where once that backbone is in place, you can see all sorts of connections for that through car branch service. We're going to start with that backbone in mind to see how it performs and see what that pair is. But from that, I think we can begin to see how those other spurs might perform.
Okay.
It becomes, I don't say parking lot, but I think there's a list of subsequent opportunities that we're beginning to think about once this starter service is in place. So if there's any other questions on route, the next slide talks about the overall service development plan and the sequence of activities.
Commissioner Brackey, go ahead, please.
Great, thank you. My question has to do on your route analysis. It says connect the Front Range communities and major markets. Is your analysis, back to our prior conversation, we're looking at travel shed change over time, population growth and job growth over time. Is your analysis looking at that and combining the North Front Range model and the Dr. Cog model to understand where those markets, not just where they are today, but where will they be in the future?
Yes. And so it was great to listen to Alex talk about the methodology, and it's the same data. I think we're using it from the demographer or from DOLA, the information that's available today, but also the projections for 2045. And that is both population centers and employment centers. And so those get fed into the statewide travel model, which is activity based. And so it gives us an informed projection on where those activity centers will be in the future.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, guys, please continue.
Okay, so we're probably halfway through. We're entering the heart of our alternatives analysis, where we'll be identifying, FRA will be identifying a route, and then we'll start testing out different scenarios for service. We talked about Fort Collins to Pueblo, and we'll look at different number of trips and see what the ridership response is and see what the railroad's response is. We'll be looking at fleet. There's a lot of interest on what's emerging, but also what's permissible by current standards and what's allowable on the railroad tracks themselves. From then, we'll start our engineering team. Will look to see what type of infrastructure is needed. And then we'll be able to bring a range of options to the public, to the district to react to. And that's really on a performance side of things. And then after the holidays, we'll start costing out those scenarios and seeing really the financial feasibility of each of them. And that will be a further data point for the plan itself. Much like a PEL, we can't do this in a vacuum. We need to understand sensitive resources, what type of methodologies and partnerships are needed, what types of permitting is needed. The good news is that we have a lot of existing information out there, right? We studied the corridor and specifically the Region 4 team from the North I-25 information has a lot of stuff that's still valid. We'll do some preliminary engineering. Governance is really, the districts. This is an FRA deliverable, but I think Colorado's way out in front in terms of governance. And we'll bundle this report in the fall. So I think, we're doing engagement at, the corridor-wide level, at the regional level, segment level, MPOs, and you can imagine the different stories that are taking place up and down the corridor. They're very distinct. And Andy talked about the diverse nature of the corridor. It remains an ambitious but grounded approach. It's something that we're pretty excited about. I think that's my last slide on the service development plan before I hand it back to Andy to talk about next steps.
Wonderful, Art. Thank you. So how do we get there, right? It's we are under no illusion that this is going to be easy, that it's going to be fast, that it's going to be cheap. The plan ahead, where we are, one of the things that we do want to communicate, though, to our partners and to the folks in the corridor is that, as you can see from this chart, we've done a lot of work to get to where we are right now, and I feel that the district is well positioned to leverage opportunities, for Colorado in the Front Range. We are right at that point right now where David discussed, some of the information coming out of the service development plan is going to start building in that picture of costs, service, locations, alignment, financing strategies. In addition to the service development plan, right, we're having a bunch of conversations outside of that, as you would imagine, because we need to develop those partnerships and conversations in this very large district that's got a very diverse political base and many different beliefs about passenger rail and how it should be delivered. So that's where we are right now. Our next step, as I mentioned before, will be finalizing the service development plan and starting into the NEPA process. We are hopeful that it will be an efficient NEPA process. CDOT and the federal government are working through some opportunities to streamline some NEPA environmental clearance that the FRA had not kind of thought about before, but because there are so many of these possible corridors to be developed around the country, and so many applications and so much money that needs to get out the door quickly, the FRA is willing to listen to folks on ideas and opportunities to make the process more efficient. So we are optimistic on that as well. Next slide. This is one I'd like to take a little bit of time on, and it's an important one for me. As I mentioned and alluded to before, the ballot measure, I see this in Denver as a local government election. And as you all know, what we need at a local level to pass a ballot measure for funding moving into the future is clarity on what the ask is, how much it will be, and a real clear message and a value that voter feels. If they spend $1 a year, they're going to get a value for this amount of money that they are spending. So without that, I don't see a successful ballot measure passing. And without a successful ballot measure, I'm pessimistic about the future, and it will take a much longer time, and we will miss a clean opportunity of where we are right now. So the ballot measure and the ballot initiative and the process is very important to the district. You can see here we've gotten through 2022. We're on track on that. In 23, we're also on track in that. I mentioned the CIDP process. It does have in there that the board chooses an operator. We are having a conversation. We may not actually choose the operator this year, but the board is having a conversation about what that means, what the service would entail if they chose Amtrak, if they chose a third party, if we partner with the commuter line, what are these things? So, obviously that's something that the board will have to digest and learn about. Moving into 24, finalizing the service development plan, like David was saying, and using that opportunity and using that data as an opportunity to expand out the financial modeling, the financing options, looking into possible bonding opportunities by leveraging future revenues. So, really trying to be creative around identifying the financing of the costs and everything associated with it. Moving into 25, we're looking into, maybe realizing some additional dollars from that CIDP fund, moving into NEPA, and all throughout this, allowing that time to bake the relationships with the railroads, identify the projects, get to a 30% design standard so that we aren't surprised with additional funding or additional needs that come afterwards. Just trying to take the time to get as much information for the ballot measure as possible for the final ballot measure coming into 2026. That's the hope. That's the plan. As we know, nothing ever goes as planned. So, stay tuned on what we are looking at. I think there's also opportunities, not necessarily to go to the ballot in 24 for what I describe as the big enchilada, because we won't have the information we need for that. But maybe there's an opportunity in 24 for a smaller ballot measure. But in order to get a smaller ballot measure, and whether that is a clarification of passenger and commuter roles along the Northwest Rail, or identifying opportunities for Burnham Yard, or whatever this takes, a governance structure for Bloody Blue, whatever measure that ballot could take, it would be hoped that it could be a politically successful one that communicates the needs and the desires for the passenger rail moving forward. So there's conversations around that as well right now too. Next slide, please.
Hey, Andy, this is Suzette again. Just a quick question. So I listened into your meeting on Friday, and there was the lady there from the governor's office that was really pushing, putting some pressure on all of you to get something on a ballot in 2024. How does that affect what you just laid out, or does it?
It does. I mean, there's obviously a lot of politics associated with the district right now. David is dealing with the engineering and the FRA and the engineering of it all and the planning, and I get to deal with all the politics of it. So to answer your question, Suzette, it impacts us. It overlays a political timeline onto what I just described that can be beneficial, and maybe in some areas isn't as efficient as it would be without. But it's a reality. I also know that the governor is a big fan of passenger rail and he wants this to succeed. And in other corridor developments, I've talked to a lot of a variety of different corridors existing and upcoming around the country over the last year. And a lot of them, if not all of them, maybe with the exception of one, said that the strong state support, whether that's from the legislature or from the governor, even better, both, is a key factor in being successful. So I do not want to alienate my most powerful political supporter. And at the same time, I don't want to cede all authority and opportunity for the political timeline to that, office as well. So it's an ongoing balance, just like we all work through. Your board of county commissioners does, all of the mayors and everybody. It's just an ongoing conversation to work through.
Thanks.
Yeah. Next slide. Is that it? This gets to what we were talking about before. This is key for the district, and this is one of the main focus areas that I will be concentrating my resources on and my time over the next couple of years, building these partnerships and local coordination. And just to highlight a few of them, right, the most important ones, I think, right in the middle, the local governments, right up at the top, whether that's financial support with the state legislature, everything that we've talked about before, the variety of different funding that will be necessary to capture this at the right times, generating that public support for the ballot measure, the station planning and station improvement districts, which is something that we rarely get an opportunity to discuss, but I really enjoyed diving down into that because that's really some tangible opportunities that your constituents will want and want to discuss. The multimodal connectivity and the planning, designing, and implementation, all of these folks, we are having conversations with everybody right now up and down the corridor on all of these topics. And so it's a broad-ranging conversation. It's exciting to have. And I think that's my last slide. And with that, I would open up any additional conversations, and my contact and David's contact information is on the last slide here. We welcome any opportunity to continue the dialogue with you all and really grateful for the time that you gave us. Thank you.
Questions for the team here? Please, Brent.
Have you guys considered just the Boulder to Denver and not coming north?
Yes. Um, the challenge for that, though, is this is an inner city passenger rail corridor. So the Federal Rail Administration, and David can probably speak to this better than me, characterizes this corridor as a certain length in order to be eligible for that CIDP and additional federal dollars. And so to do something like that would not qualify us to be a passenger rail corridor. It would be more of a commuter rail corridor, which is already in existence.
What about like a Boulder to Colorado Springs? Is that the same situation?
I believe so. David, is that correct?
You just took
I
out the-
think Mayor, to your point earlier about phasing and deep variations within the study area, ideally end to end would be great and to be done all at once. But I think we've seen with North I-25 and other major projects that a lot of times it's built in phases. And so we'll demonstrate what the business case is, and then we'll start seeing if it can't be done all at once, what's the logical implementation plan for that? And so
That's an interesting challenge. If it's built in phases, will it be taxed in phases?
So
correct.
we literally just had a finance committee discussion around this today, Commissioner. And one of the values that we want to try and hold dear to this conversation throughout, as best we can, is kind of this equity through time and equity through location in the district. So if you are close to the station and to the services offered and you are able to capture a larger value, maybe you pay a larger contribution. If you are not going to get services for an extended time during this phase conversation or for whatever, then maybe your jurisdiction doesn't pay the taxes until that time, that 3 years before your service or something along these lines. So all of those conversations come with additional legal considerations, as you can imagine. And so we started having that conversation today. We'll continue having that conversation through the SDP. And I'm sure I'm going to spend a lot of consultant dollars on trying to finalize that conversation.
When it comes to the siting of stations, I know the criteria is interesting, as disproportionately impacted communities. Have they been considered for siting of locations?
Go ahead,
Can you clarify? You said sightings or
Yeah, when
for
it
the
comes to where you put a station, where you
stations?
put it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we conduct a market analysis, and we're trying to identify where the trips, where the really good pairs, where are the trips starting and where are they ending. And so we'll use demographic information for that, but that also includes a lot of the new tools that are coming available to understand the zones. I'm drawing a blank right now on identifying what populations and where they are along the corridor. So the past market analysis identified where those communities are, and so we'll recognize where there's alignment and whether there's gaps.
So going on to that, isn't that some of that available for census data on disproportionately impacted communities, really being one kind of an area?
Yeah.
Are we looking at the Census Bureau at all? Because it seems like some of this might be going through more affluent areas. Boulder.
It is using census information.
So how are we going? I mean, I understand that fast track, it's right in there that to go with fast tracks and kind of bootleg the Boulder, but if FRA requirement would be, one of the criteria on there was disproportionately impacted communities. How are you working around that or working with that?
I think it's one of several criteria. And so you can imagine that all 14 or 15 of those elements may not be green, or so we have to kind of have some hard conversations about where those trade-offs and balance some of those things. But making sure that it's a part of the conversation and not kind of cast aside. That's something that's a federal value, and it's something that's a value at the state level too.
Okay. If you're on the east side of I-25, what are any initial thoughts, or Bertha in that matter, why someone would want to pass this? You know, what majority of voters or elected officials would want to get behind this if there's an interstate and a highway in the way? You know, this is a rail tax, and they're not going to be seeing any rail benefit.
Well, let me jump in here real fast. I think it's a little early to say that there's going to be no benefit from anybody in the district that doesn't actually have a station in their area, whether that's east of I-25 or west of I-25. It's way too premature to say anything like that. Just by virtue of having the passenger rail system, if we are able to do this, and if we are able to make this happen, that alone will create a vastly different transit opportunity for the entire region that we do not have right now. That will help every part of the district, whether it's directly connected to it or not, whether it's through increased opportunities for multimodal stations, connectivity. Remember that passenger rail is different than commuter rail, where around the country and in Colorado in the Front Range, it depends because we haven't had this before. But as we develop this and around the country, we need to recognize that with passenger rail, many of the people who come to passenger rail drive to a station or arrive there by bus in order to do longer trips than what we are used to with commuter rail. So how we envision this and how we talk about it, I think, is important. It's too early right now to be able to communicate to everybody in the district what the value of this will be, but that is something that is on that I need to do and that the district needs to do. And if we can't do it, well, then shame on us, and we need to be able to accept those consequences as well.
Yeah, I'm not saying that there would be zero benefit. I'm using Greeley because they're kind of part of this out example. It's just kind of something like a rational, like a nexus or a tangible benefit. It, could help employment somewhere, but a way to have data on that.
I'm sorry, Mayor. I apologize. Go ahead, please.
No, you're fine. Yeah, there's a delay. Or if you're getting additional transit, how does that benefit you beyond the bus staying, the flex, to get whatever you already have? What is this tax going to benefit? All that stuff is kind of, in my opinion, the questions we have up here when we're talking the finance, about the finance committee and phasing or some kind of equitable approach to how close you are to the station. I think those are really good to get out there before talking about the ballot, especially 2024. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot to have those answers now, and I know we've kind of talked about this in the past, but any chance to expedite those questions would be really appreciated.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Mayor, because as I go to different communities and I do different presentations around the district, I hear that as well. What is the value for us? What does this bring? Whether it's decrease of greenhouse gas or decrease of VMT or availability of transit and multimodal. I wish I did have those for you, and we will get those, better answers for you all. I wish I had them for you tonight.
For my part, I'm being challenged to go faster on the study to try to align with this political opportunity. And what I'm hearing is this is that's always kind of the charge on planning is to go faster. We have anecdotes. FRA's budget has increased by 10 with this new program. And so they're staffing up to distribute this money. And they, not like FTA or FHW, they don't have a Colorado presence. Everything is out of their national office. And so we're competing for their attention with 50 other states. And so while we're out front and we're a mature, established state that's proactive and has been good stewards of federal dollars, we are trying to compete for time. And we've also learned lessons that if we go fast without the railroads, then sometimes those corridors are sent back to the beginning and having to do it over again. So we're really getting squeezed. from a project management perspective, we're trying to go as fast as we possibly can.
All right, folks, I'm 9 minutes behind my timeline, and that's when I get crabby. Andy and David, thank you so much for your presentation. I know your contact information is there, and we'll connect with you if we have more.
Thank you all so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Mr. Chair, could I add one more thing?
Please go ahead.
Just Johnny and I being the reps, if you guys have any questions or comments on our stances or lack of, just please feel free to reach out. Kind of just generally asking the questions to the board that I just asked tonight and trying to get some of that answered, and also at the same time trying to be a team player. But if you guys have any particular questions you want me to answer or ask in a board of directors meeting or whatnot, please just feel free to reach out.
Thanks for doing that, Will. Okay, let's move on to council reports. Transportation Commissioner report. Commissioner Brackett, please.
Sure. Great, well, thank you for the opportunity to be here again today, and it was helpful to hear that presentation from Andy and David. The Transportation Commission did approve some additional funding for Front Range Passenger Rail technical analysis at our meeting last month, so helps to see the details on where that's going. I do have a lot of questions, so maybe I'll follow up with you.
I have questions for you.
Okay, all right, so that'd be great. And so anyway, that definitely very interesting. And then the timeline piece is interesting in terms of, like you were asking the questions about the route and how that's playing out. And it seems like a lot of lessons learned from other parts of the state too. So I'll just stay tuned on that. It'd be good to follow up and talk more. I also had the opportunity to listen in to the public meeting Monday night on the 1101. I like how you put that, Suzette. It's not just a TPR boundary study, but it's really the representation piece around stack and track as well. I'm so glad that there was so much participation from Northern Colorado, because that's been something that to me is so important. I mean, even CDOT can hold these public meetings, but if no one comes and nobody then talks when they do come, they're just sort of an exercise. But you guys showed up and participated and asked a lot of good questions. And so I thought that was really helpful. And I appreciate Herman and Jamie. They've been coming out and coming to this group, coming to the other TPR meetings. So hopefully there's a lot of ongoing dialogue. And like you said, Suzette, hopefully people are filling out the survey that's online and at least get your voices out there. I think it's also bringing up other questions, not so much around the TPR piece, but what I heard at the public meeting was, again, the question about Wellington and the North Front Range and participation. And I hope there can be more conversations about that going forward. I heard the response about they haven't physically grown to connect to Fort Collins. But what worries me about that is most of the communities in Northern Colorado have community separators by design in their land use plans, so that we don't all sprawl together. And when I see the map that we were looking at earlier, it's good that we're growing in and not out, but I've lived in Northern Colorado over 30 years, and then I look at the Denver metro area by comparison. What's nice where we live today, you know, when you're in Loveland, when you're in Fort Collins, when you're in Windsor or Timnah, there's community separators that protect that individualism and identity of our communities, versus when you go to Denver, frankly, at least for me, I can't tell if I'm in Westminster or Broomfield or North Glen or Ravenna. It's all just run together. So my hope is that through our collaborative land use and transportation planning, the foresight to have community separators doesn't come back to then negatively impact the ability for regional or cross-regional transportation planning. So that was specific. Again, it's not related to the TPR boundary issue or representation, but it's more about how do we enhance Northern Colorado through our transportation planning without becoming like some of the other areas that have all mushed together. That's my technical term for the night. and actually incentivize that good land use planning versus saying you're boxed out because you have that. So again, it's more of a future conversation, but I'm glad that at least the dialogue is happening. The other piece was listening into the staff meeting today about the RPP formula, so many, many hours later. So I appreciate the.
We got to where we were.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so all the way around to get back to where you started, so, but again, you all bring a great voice to those conversations and the why behind the formula pieces, not just arguing over what percent is the right number. That meeting could still be going. That was the case. So, if there's things I can do around that, let me know. And then I also wanted to say, thank you again to Well County for agreeing to submit the mega grant, and Elizabeth Burrell for your work on that, and Well County contributing the $5 million to that. It seems like a great opportunity, a very competitive project to get that funding for segment 5, and again, leverage those dollars so more can get done there. So it seems like there's a lot of good stuff that's happening, and again, just put that invitation out. If people have questions, feel free to reach out to me, and anything I can do to help through my role in TC. Or, like I said, I'm on a month-to-month lease. So that or I'm a bad penny, I just keep showing up.
I would just say one comment. We will be in front of the Transportation Commission this month for our greenhouse gas report, so that is coming in front of you.
Okay, yeah, if there's any information you want to share with that, let me know. You guys did a great job presenting that last time, so anything I can do to help with that. Thank you.
Questions for Commissioner Brackey, please? Thank you. CDOT Region 4 update. It is Josie in place of Heather. Hi, Josie.
Hi, good evening. Hope you guys can hear me okay. My update is going to be pretty short because Commissioner Brackey had a fantastic update and had a lot of my items on here. I will say I echo her sentiments with the virtual public meeting that we had for Region 4. We had a fantastic turnout, and we're bragging internally about all of our amazingly engaged stakeholders. I'm very proud to be a part of this region, and you guys really do make it such a great place to work and be in. So thank you for all of you for joining. But if you couldn't make it, the meeting materials and the recording, they are online. I can post the link to that in the chat here so that Suzette or Becky might be able to send that out to you guys. But it was a really great meeting, and we're learning a lot. And I think on top of, the boundaries and all the things that TPRs, the inconsistencies we're seeing there, I do feel that we're going to walk away from this as well, seeing a long list of things that CDOT can improve, which is great. It's not all about where our TPRs maybe are falling short in some areas. It's about us as well. And I know we see inconsistencies internally as well. So just want to make that a point. And then lastly, real quick, thank you. I think it's Alex controlling the screen. He pulled it up for me. The inactive projects report, we give this quarterly to TAC, but Suzette wanted you guys to see it as well quarterly. So you guys are going to start seeing this in your handouts every few months. It's a pretty simple document, but basically this report meets a federal requirement for CDOT to keep track of projects that are not meeting their billing submittals as required by their IGA. So it hits on a couple of things. It shows how much money remains in a project's phase, how long it's been since the last invoice or since the project was authorized and hasn't had any invoices. The FHW end date, so that's basically, so for federally funded project, any work that occurs outside of that performance phase period or is invoiced after that phase end date, it's not eligible for reimbursement. So it's really important that project managers keep tabs on that FHWA end date. I do hear it's rather simple to get that date extended if it has not expired. This is a little bit out of my wheelhouse, more my local agency team's wheelhouse, but it does take a few weeks for that to happen, so planning ahead is really crucial there. I'll also note that this report can have some flaws because there are some projects that only plan to be reimbursed during construction but end up on this list as they're still in design. So if you have questions on any projects here, reach out to me and I can get you connected with Bryce Reeves, my local agency resident engineer. But that's what you're looking at here. So that's all I got.
Questions for Josie, please.
Ed, this is Troy Mellon from Johnstown. Our project there, the $250,000 project in yellow, we haven't gotten the contract from CDOT yet, so we can't expend any money.
Yep, that's one of those things that that's why it's showing up on here. Troy, if you want, you can send me an email on that and I can get you connected with Bryce so we can hopefully get you an update on where we're at with that. I don't have any access in my role myself, but I'm happy to start making those conversations happen.
Thank you.
Additional questions or comments for Josie? Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. CDOT inactives report, I guess we just saw that. Yep. Stack report is written. Colorado Transportation Investment Office report is written. I-25 Coalition, I'll just be very brief because you already heard kind of the big news last night, the fact that the well is applying for them again, they got a little more skin in the game. So we're proud to do that and excited about getting that mega award. I know we will. Okay, NAPME. Commissioner Stevens, are you online? She is not online. Okay.
Is Cecil Gutierrez online by chance for CTIR? You said he might be.
Cecil.
I guess I wrote it anyway, so I don't think we got
I
it.
haven't seen him on there.
Front Range Passenger Rail District. Don't you think we talked about it?
Yeah, I got points at all.
I'll hold off on it.
Okay. Thanks, Mayor. Host council member report. Mayor Mello, please.
Welcome all. Thank you for finding Johnstown. You know, we're somewhat off the beaten path sometimes, and hard to find. I guess just a couple things to highlight. We're getting real close to wrapping up a design study on State Highway 60, pretty much from the east side of town to the interstate, how that looks basically as a 4-lane road coming from the interstate most of the way into town. We're looking at the challenges of the right of ways and intersection alignments. We have to do essentially a realignment on the intersection at Colorado Boulevard. It's not a perfectly 90-degree intersection, so we've been told by CDOT we have to make it 90 degrees. So we're having some discussions about whose protractor we're going to use. The other project that's transportation related in town, it's probably maybe unique to small towns, but one of the first main streets in town that was ever run is Charlotte Avenue, and it's become more of an archaeological dig than a road project, but we're hopefully that will be done here in another month or so. We've done a lot of the streetscape improvements, taking down 70 years of asphalt was a real challenge as well. They didn't believe it. They just kept laying more asphalt, more asphalt, and more asphalt. There's a lot of asphalt. But anyway, what this will eventually do is, if you know the geography of Johnstown, Charlotte runs between the traditional downtown and what used to be Ledford Elementary School. Well, that is going to turn into a town park. And so there'll be somewhat of a boulevard, if you will, from the old town to a park that we don't quite know what's going to look like yet. But it was a town park up until the early 40s when we gave it to the school district to build an elementary school. It was the Johnstown School District at the time, District 48. So they graciously gave it back to us. And we're going to see what that looks like. Is it an active recreation park? Is it passive? Is it a mix? Is it pickleball courts? Is it?
Watch out.
Yeah, swimming pools.
Don't
But I think it makes for that unique traditional Americana walk from, the grocery store to the park kind of thing. I know Scott's getting grumpy, so I'll cut it off there.
Congratulations, fellas.
You remember that look?
Congratulations on what?
Are you married now?
Yes.
You got downgrade.
I can't be quite as, I have to be civil now.
Troy was married before me and after.
He was married when my dad was married.
Which I don't know if that's.
I remember you when I was a little kid. And actually, he was on a reel in Fort Collins. This is all tying in together.
All right. If there's any pertinent info to come before the council on next month's agenda, make sure you go through suggestions to Suzette. If not, thank you for attending, and we'll stand adjourned.
Thank you.